At my son's wedding, I sat down and discovered a warning note under my plate. If your daughter-in-law goes out alone, hide and watch her. I thought it was nonsense, but the very instant I secretly watched her, I was left trembling, unable to say a word. I am glad you are here. If you are watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I stood in the middle of the grand ballroom, feeling like I was living a dream, my heart about to burst with happiness. My son Arthur was there, elegant in his tuxedo, holding the hand of his new wife, Victoria, with a look full of love. The lights from the crystal chandelier shone brightly, casting a warm, golden glow that reflected off the white silk ribbons and the red roses that decorated the silver vases. The sound of the string quartet mixed with the laughter and cheerful conversations, forming a symphony of joy. I wore an elegant dress, fitting for the mother of the groom, with my chest swollen with pride and hope. Today, my family was more complete than ever. Or at least, that is what I believed. I walked slowly to the table reserved for the family, where everything was meticulously arranged. The silver plates gleamed, the white linen napkins were carefully folded, and the candles flickered, reflecting their light like tiny stars. I smiled seeing Arthur and Victoria chatting with the guests, their smiles as radiant as the dawn. As a mother, I had dreamed of this day for years, the day my son would find the happiness of his life. But in that instant, when I lifted my napkin, a small piece of paper folded into a square fell silently from under my plate. I was surprised, thinking perhaps it was a note of good wishes from a guest, a delicate gesture fitting for a wedding. Curiously, I opened the paper, my hands trembling with age. The handwriting, clumsy but clear, hit me like a punch to the gut. Do not trust her. If your daughter-in-law goes out alone, follow her, hide, and watch. A chill ran through my body, as if my blood had turned to ice. I lifted my head, looking around, but the world continued to sparkle, oblivious. The laughter, the toasts, the music still filled the air. No one noticed me, that moment when my heart seemed to clench. That small piece of paper, burning like a hot coal in my hand, filled me with anguish. I quickly folded it, tucked it into my coat pocket, and tried to calm myself. Who had left it there? Why target Victoria, the young woman I had loved and trusted like a daughter? I turned my gaze back to Arthur. My son was laughing, his eyes bright, as he held Victoria's hand. She, with her angelic smile, red lips, and a glass of wine between her fingers, responded gracefully to the guests. She looked perfect, a dream bride. But those words, cold and sharp, kept spinning in my mind, planting a seed of doubt I had never felt before. I tried to focus on the conversation of the Martin relatives who had just flown in from Chicago. They talked endlessly about the family's financial empire, of important business deals that interested me little. But my mind only revolved around one question. What did that paper mean? And then, as if fate had planned it, Victoria smiled sweetly, stood up, and announced to everyone, "I am just going to step outside for a bit of fresh air." Her voice sounded light, carefree, but my heart leaped. The note's warning echoed in my head, pushing me to act. I stood up quickly. I pretended to ask a waiter for the way to the restroom and stealthily made my way to the garden behind the ballroom. My hands were trembling. I did not know if it was from age or from the fear growing inside me. The gravel path crunched under my feet, leading me to the garden illuminated by hanging paper lanterns. The air was filled with the sweet, intoxicating scent of night-blooming jasmine. But not even that could calm the racing heart in my chest. I heard a familiar laugh, Victoria's clear voice, and I slowed my pace, hiding behind a thick bush of wild roses near the white wooden gazebo. I held my breath, fearing the slightest sound would ruin everything. And then I saw them. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, whom I once trusted completely, was there, shoulder to shoulder with a man dressed in a black suit. I recognized him. Julian, a business associate of the Martin family, whom I had only seen a couple of times. The distance between them was too short, too intimate, and I felt my chest tighten. Julian took a thin folder from his pocket, pointed to something in it, and whispered in a voice that cut through the night's stillness. "All she needs to do is sign this, and Arthur will have no say in his mother's businesses." Victoria let out a sharp, cold laugh, very different from the sweetness she always showed in front of me. "That old woman really thinks I am the perfect daughter-in-law," she said mockingly. "This has all been easier than we imagined." Julian raised his hand and gently stroked Victoria's cheek. She did not pull away. She even leaned her head into his hand, a triumphant look in her eyes. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the entire world crumble beneath my feet. The woman I had loved like a daughter, the one I had welcomed into my home with affection, was conspiring against my family, against my own son. I stepped back in horror, but my foot landed on a dry branch. The snap sounded small, but deafening in the garden's silence. I held my breath, my heart stopped. Victoria started and looked around, her eyes nervous. Julian, however, calmed her with a steady voice. "It must have been a stray cat. No one would have time to follow us." Trembling, I turned and began to walk slowly back to the ballroom, each step heavier than the last. My heart was pounding, and my mind was filled with unanswered questions. Who was Victoria, really? What was she planning? And the person who left that note, what did they know that I had not yet discovered? When I returned to the table, the band was already playing a more upbeat tune, as if trying to drown out the chaos raging inside me. Victoria was there, seated, her cheeks flushed and the same radiant smile on her face, as if she had never left the room, as if that terrifying scene had never happened. She leaned toward Arthur, whispering something in his ear that made him laugh, his eyes full of love. Amid the joyful wedding music, with the chandelier lights twinkling and laughter echoing around me, my mind drifted to another memory, so vivid it hurt. It was a rainy afternoon, more than a year ago, when Arthur first introduced me to Victoria. That day, a gentle drizzle was falling on the brick facade of the Sterling Grill, the business I had built with sweat and tears for over 40 years. I was sitting in my small office behind the kitchen, reviewing the accounting books, the numbers dancing before my eyes like a familiar melody. Arthur's voice sounded from the doorway, full of enthusiasm. "Mom, I want you to meet someone very special." His voice, normally calm, was infused with joy that day, like a child showing off his most precious treasure. I looked up and smiled, though with a slight curiosity. Arthur had never brought anyone home with such a glowing expression. The door opened, and Victoria walked in. She wore an emerald green silk dress, elegant but not ostentatious. Her black hair carefully waved, falling softly on her shoulders. She stood next to Arthur, with a smile charming and shy enough to look like a perfect painting. "I am Victoria. It is a pleasure to meet you," she said in a voice as soft as velvet, extending her small hand to greet me. I shook her hand, feeling the warmth and confidence emanating from the young woman. But deep down, something surprised me. For years, both I and the entire neighborhood had assumed that Lily, the girl who had grown up next door to Arthur, would be my future daughter-in-law. Their friendship was as natural as breathing. Lily, with her clear eyes and kind smile, had always been an essential part of Arthur's childhood memories. And yet, today, the one standing before me was Victoria. Arthur broke my confusion with a radiant smile. "Mom, this is Victoria, Lily's best friend. We met thanks to her." Those words reassured me a little. If she was a friend of Lily's, then she must be a good person. I invited them to sit at the table, where I had prepared a simple but warm dinner. Pot roast with all the fixings, my family's recipe, and a pitcher of fresh iced tea. Victoria looked around the room. Her eyes paused on the family photos hanging on the wall, and then she smiled at me. "Lily has told me so much about you and the Sterling Grill restaurant chain. I admire you so much, truly. A strong woman who built everything from scratch." Her words were sweet, sincere enough to make me feel proud, but not so much as to arouse suspicion. I nodded, satisfied, thinking that Arthur had found a girl who was not only beautiful but also well-mannered. Throughout dinner, Victoria painted a perfect picture of her family. She said her parents ran a large financial firm in Chicago, a busy but comfortable life. "My dad always says that in business, money is not enough. You also need heart," she commented, her eyes shining as if sharing a valuable secret. Arthur, sitting beside her, could not take his eyes off her, and occasionally added, "Mom, Victoria also helps her dad with charity projects. It is incredible." I looked at my son, at his expression full of love, and felt my heart melt. I lost my husband when Arthur was just a boy, and I raised the restaurant and my family alone. Seeing him so happy made me want to thank heaven. A few weeks later, Victoria's family came to visit. They arrived in a gleaming black sedan, the kind only the wealthy own. The father, Edward, was a tall man in a gray suit, who greeted me with a firm handshake. His wife Caroline wore a red silk suit and smiled with the confidence of someone accustomed to living at the top. They sat and talked of million-dollar deals with foreign partners, of their contacts with influential politicians and businessmen. "We are very happy that Victoria is marrying into the Sterling family," Caroline said, with a sweet but proud voice. "A respectable family, with tradition. They are truly worthy of our daughter." My friends, who stopped by to say hello that day, could not stop praising them. "Eleanor, your son is so lucky," whispered Rose, a friend of many years. "The Martin family is a real catch." I completely trusted that charade. I thought Victoria was a gift that fate had given to Arthur, to our family. Every time she stopped by the restaurant bringing a bouquet of fresh flowers or a bottle of fine wine as a gift, my affection for her grew. She always knew how to make me feel respected, valued. "Eleanor, you are an inspiration to me," she told me once, while standing beside me in the kitchen, watching Chef Henry carefully prepare a pot roast. I smiled, patted her on the shoulder, believing I was a fortunate woman to have such a daughter-in-law. But now, standing in the middle of the wedding, with the mysterious paper in my pocket and the image of Victoria and Julian together in the garden still haunting my mind, all the memories of that first meeting felt false, repulsive. Victoria's words in the garden, "That old woman really thinks I am the perfect daughter-in-law," were like a stab to the heart. They had deceived me. I had let her perfect facade cloud my judgment. I looked around the ballroom, trying to keep a smile on my face, but my eyes accidentally met Lily's. She was sitting quietly at a corner table, her hands clasped and a forced smile that barely concealed a deep sadness. She looked at Arthur with an expression of pain that I now finally understood. I remembered the moment of the introduction, when Lily was also there. She stood behind Victoria with a slight smile and then took a step back, ceding the spotlight to her friend. At the time I thought it was shyness, but now I understand that her gaze hid a truth she did not dare to speak. I returned to the table with heavy steps, forcing myself to sketch a strained smile. The hall was still brightly lit. The band's music filled the air, but inside me everything was covered in an icy fog. I tried to join the celebratory atmosphere, nodding at the congratulations from the guests, but my mind could not stray from the image of Victoria and Julian in the garden. That man, with his black suit and cold voice, had vanished like a ghost, as if he had never existed. Only I, solely I, carried this terrible secret, and the paper hidden in my pocket burned like a live coal, reminding me of the dreadful truth. I looked at Arthur, my son, sitting next to Victoria. She tilted her head, whispered something in his ear, and Arthur laughed, with that carefree and happy laugh that I loved so much. But now, each of his laughs was like 1,000 needles piercing my chest. My son, the son for whom I gave my whole life, was being deceived right in front of me, and I still did not know how to protect him. Victoria's parents, Edward and Caroline, continued to move between the tables, shaking hands with confident smiles and voices full of pride. "We are so fortunate that our daughter has married a Sterling, such a respected family," Caroline would say, in a sweet but authoritative tone, as if they already felt they owned a place in our family. Those words, which once filled me with pride, now filled me with repulsion. I wanted to stand up, to shout the truth, but I held myself back, gripping my wine glass so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I knew that if I acted impulsively, I could lose everything: the trust of Arthur, the reputation of our family, and the business I built for 40 years. Mrs. Rose, an old friend from the days when I sold baked goods on a street corner, sat down beside me and exclaimed, "Eleanor, your daughter-in-law is so poised. You can tell she comes from a good family. The Martins have always had a good reputation." She smiled, her eyes shining with joy, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I could only force a smile and respond in a weak voice. "Yes, Victoria is very special." The word special left my mouth with a bitter taste. Special? Yes, special in the way she conceals, in how she weaves a perfect play to deceive us all. I glanced over at Lily, the neighbor I had always considered a daughter. She was sitting silently at a corner table, her hands clasped, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her. Her gaze followed Arthur, but not with admiration or joy, but with a deep concern, as if she carried a heavy secret. I remembered that same look, the way Lily stepped back the day Victoria was introduced, yielding the spotlight to her friend. At that moment I thought it was shyness, but now I wonder if Lily knew something. Did she see what I did not, but could not say it? I felt a knot in my chest. If Lily really knew something, why did she not tell me? And if she did not know, why did her eyes reflect so much pain? I tried to focus on the party, on the lively conversations of the family, but my mind was torn in two. One part wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that Victoria could not be the woman I saw in the garden. The other, the rational part, whispered that I had to face the truth. The paper in my pocket, the whispers between Victoria and Julian, it was all too obvious. I felt like a fool, a blind mother who trusted her daughter-in-law's perfect appearance without noticing the small signs that had perhaps been there all along. As the guests began to leave, Victoria resumed her role as the exemplary daughter-in-law. She bowed to each person, her voice as sweet as honey. "Thank you for coming. I hope to see you again soon." The guests smiled, praising her for her politeness and kindness. No one, except me, saw the real person behind that mask. I stood there, watching her act, while a sense of helplessness washed over me. How could I tell Arthur? How could I make him understand that the woman he loved was plotting against our family? I was afraid he would not believe me, that he would think it was jealousy or that I wanted to separate them. My son was always a sensitive, trusting man, and that only increased my anguish. That night, when I got home, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and slowly began to remove my makeup. The dim yellow light illuminated my tired face, with the deep wrinkles that time and responsibilities had marked. It was an image completely opposite to that of Victoria, radiant and triumphant at the party. Life after Arthur and Victoria's wedding flowed like a silent river. Arthur was busy with his work at the architecture firm, coming home late, his eyes tired but a smile on his face when he spoke of Victoria. "She really cares about our family, Mom," he would tell me with pride. I would just nod, hiding the worry that grew inside me. Meanwhile, Victoria began to more clearly show her role as the future owner of the family business. She frequently went to the family's main restaurant, the one I had worked and sweated for over 40 years. She would walk through the kitchen, speaking kindly to the employees, her smile as sweet as honey. "I just want to learn how you handle things, Eleanor," she would tell me, with a seemingly innocent look, but I no longer believed in that sincerity. One afternoon, I caught Victoria with the head chef, Henry, who had worked for my family for over 2 decades. She was holding a small notebook, meticulously writing down the recipe for the pot roast, the traditional dish my mother had taught me and that I had entrusted to Henry, with the instruction that it should never be shared with anyone outside the family. "Victoria, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She startled, quickly closed the notebook, and smiled. "Just curious, Eleanor. This dish is so delicious I want to learn it to cook for Arthur." Her explanation sounded smooth, but her gaze, which avoided mine, chilled my blood. I nodded, pretending not to notice anything, but inside me a voice whispered that she was planning something much bigger. What I feared most finally happened one night, when the whole family was gathered at the table. Arthur, with an enthusiastic expression, suddenly said, "Mom, Victoria suggested that I should put a part of the restaurant chain in my name. She says it is to protect the family assets, in case you ever need someone to help you carry the load." My son's words were like a knife that pierced my thoughts. I froze, the glass in my hand trembling slightly. "And what have you decided?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was pounding. Arthur smiled without a care, like a child oblivious to everything. "I am still thinking about it, but Victoria is right, Mom. She always wants what is best for our family." I looked at Victoria. She was calmly serving the soup, her eyes clear, as if the conversation had nothing to do with her. "I understand," I replied with a dry voice, holding back a heavy sigh. But inside I knew this was not Arthur's idea. It was Victoria's plan, and I could not let it be carried out. The next day, I quietly went to the office of the lawyer my family had worked with for years. Mr. Henderson, the elderly lawyer with completely white hair, looked at me through his thick glasses and said in a grave voice, "Mrs. Sterling, Miss Martin came by recently. She asked in great detail about the procedures for transferring ownership of a business to a family member. She said it was Arthur's idea to prepare for the future." His words hit me in the chest. I nodded, thanked him, but as I left the office, I felt my legs weaken. Victoria was not only pretending in front of me, she was also taking concrete steps to take over my family's legacy. I remembered Julian's voice on the wedding night, and the thin file he had given Victoria. Everything started to make sense, like the pieces of a terrifying puzzle. When I returned to the restaurant, the atmosphere was as lively as ever. The sound of knives, the smell of grilled meat and spices filled the air. But as I entered the kitchen, I heard some employees murmuring in a corner. "The young boss has quite an air about her. She just ordered to change the entire protocol for serving VIP clients," a young waitress commented with admiration. "Yes, she also said she is inviting several important partners next week. She surely wants to make a good impression," added another, laughing under her breath. I stood still, feeling as if someone was squeezing my heart. Victoria was taking my place, step by step, and the worst part was that she was doing it with the confidence of someone who knows they are going to win. I went to the cashier area, and just as I imagined, Victoria was there, with the revenue ledger in her hand, the same one I reviewed at the end of each day. When she saw me, she quickly closed it and smiled with feigned kindness. "I was just taking a look to learn from your experience, Eleanor. You manage everything so well. I admire you so much." I nodded, returning her smile, though inside I just wanted to scream. "Learn? No." She was snooping, looking for a way to appropriate everything that belonged to my family. "Feel free, Victoria," I replied, my voice soft but icy. She did not notice the coldness in my gaze, or perhaps she was too sure of herself to do so. That night, I stood on my home's balcony, watching the illuminated city. The night air was cool, but it could not calm the restlessness growing within me. On Monday morning, the Sterling Grill was bustling as usual. I entered my small office with an inexplicable sense of heaviness. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on the invoices, but my mind wandered between doubt and fear. My young secretary, Megan, knocked on the door and entered with a brown envelope in her hand. "Mrs. Sterling, someone left this at the reception this morning. They said it was for you," she commented, her tone hesitant. I looked at the envelope. It had no return address, just crooked letters that said, "For Mrs. Eleanor Sterling." My heart skipped a beat. A bad feeling washed over me. "Thank you, dear," I replied, trying to stay calm, though my hand trembled as I took the envelope. Megan left, leaving me alone with the suffocating silence of the room. I opened the envelope slowly, as if I feared its contents could bring my world crashing down. Inside were several color photos, so sharp they were cold. The first showed Victoria, in a vibrant red dress, entering a luxurious hotel downtown. I recognized the place instantly, a place where only the rich went, or those with something to hide. The second image froze my blood. Victoria in the hotel lobby, next to Julian, the man I had seen in the garden during the wedding. They looked at each other and laughed with a repulsive complicity. I gripped the edge of the desk, breathing heavily. Those photos were no coincidence. Someone had sent them to me on purpose, as a warning or an invitation to act. Inside the envelope was also a small, black, unmarked flash drive. I locked the office door. I felt as if the whole world was watching me. With trembling hands, I plugged it into the computer. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. A recording began to play, and from the first seconds I recognized Victoria's voice, cold and confident, very different from the sweetness she used to feign. "Arthur is so trusting," she said in a mocking tone. "All it takes is a few sweet words, and he will sign immediately. Very soon, half of this restaurant chain will be in my name." Julian's voice responded, deep and full of contempt. "And by then, that old woman will not be able to do anything. An old-fashioned crone has no way to stand up to us." I sat motionless, my hands and feet frozen, as if the blood in my body had stopped flowing. Their words were like sharp knives cutting my heart. Not only had they betrayed me, but they also saw me as a fool, an old-fashioned woman, not worthy of their attention. But what hurt the most was that Arthur, my son, was being manipulated by her, turned into a pawn in her plan. I played the recording over and over, wanting to make sure I was not dreaming. Every word, every phrase was a new wound. There was someone, a person I did not yet know, who was secretly helping me, sending me this irrefutable proof. But who was it? And why did they not show themselves? I put the flash drive in my coat pocket and locked it in the drawer, but I knew those images and sounds would never be erased from my mind. I stood up, trying to breathe deeply, but the feeling of suffocation would not leave me. I wanted to run to Arthur, tell him everything, but I was scared. Scared that my son would not believe me, that he would think I was just trying to destroy his happiness. Arthur had always been a sensitive, kind-hearted person, and Victoria had known how to take perfect advantage of it. At noon, I went down to the kitchen to check the menu, but my mind was still in a tangle. As I passed the staff break area, I overheard a conversation among some employees. "The young lady has been coming in very late lately," one girl said with a curious tone. "She says she is meeting with important partners. But what kind of partners always meet at a hotel?" Another, with a hint of mockery in her voice, chimed in. "They are probably negotiating in bed." They all laughed, but the laughter died abruptly when I walked in. "What is so funny?" I asked, trying to sound calm. They looked at each other nervously, and one stammered, "Nothing, ma'am. We were just joking." I nodded without saying anything else, but their words were a painful confirmation of what I had already seen and heard. That night, Arthur came home with his usual cheerful expression. He sat at the table and told me, full of enthusiasm, "Today Victoria met with a friend to talk about a charity project for children. Mom, she is very committed. She wants to help the community." I nodded, forcing a smile. But in my head, Victoria's cold, calculating voice from the recording echoed. Arthur is so easy to fool. I looked at my son, at his eyes full of innocence, and felt my heart clench. How could I tell him that the woman he loved was deceiving him, that she was planning to steal everything our family had built? That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The ticking of the clock in the silent house seemed to count the seconds, making me feel more uneasy. Around midnight, unable to bear the confinement, I decided to go out into the garden to get some fresh air, hoping the scent of the night-blooming jasmine would calm my tormented mind. I walked slowly down the hallway, my soft slippers making a slight sound on the old wooden floor. As I passed Arthur and Victoria's room, I stopped. A faint yellow light filtered through the crack of the slightly ajar door, and a low voice was clearly audible in the silence of the night. It was Victoria's voice, but not the sweet one she used in front of me. It was cold, calculating, as if she were talking to someone on the phone. And what made me shudder was that she had it on speakerphone, perhaps convinced that we were all asleep. I stood still, pressed against the wall in the darkness, my heart pounding, trying not to let my breath give me away. "Mom, everything is going very well." Victoria's voice sounded confident, unwavering. "Arthur is a fool. I just need to say a few words and he believes me instantly." On the other end of the line, the voice of Caroline, Victoria's mother, responded with a satisfied tone. "Very good, sweetheart. Your father and Julian have arranged everything. As soon as we have the papers in hand, we will control the entire restaurant chain." I felt my blood run cold. Then the voice of Edward, Victoria's father, joined the conversation, deep and cold. "Remember to act very docile, Victoria. Do not let that old woman suspect anything. Julian is preparing the false documents to prove that Arthur lacks management capacity, in case there is any dispute." My whole body was trembling, not from the cold of the night, but from the horrifying truth that was coming to light. They not only wanted to take my family business, but they also intended to turn Arthur, my son, into a useless pawn in his own legacy. I secretly took my phone out of my robe pocket. With trembling fingers, I activated the recording mode. I could not let those words be lost to the wind. I needed proof, something to protect my family. Victoria continued, her voice calculating. "Arthur wants to have children. I am thinking that if I get pregnant, the bond will be even stronger. Then, even if she wants to, She will not be able to object. The laughter of the three of them, Victoria, Caroline, and Edward, echoed through the speakerphone, icy and cruel, as if they were celebrating a victory that had not yet occurred. I stood there, in the darkness, feeling my heart tear apart. Victoria was not only deceiving Arthur, she was also planning to use a child, a life that did not yet exist, to consolidate her plan. That idea disgusted me, but at the same time, it hurt. Arthur, my son, had always dreamed of a happy family, with children running through this house. And now that dream was being turned into an instrument in Victoria's hands. I gripped the phone tightly, trying not to let the tears escape. But then, my heel accidentally hit a broken tile on the hallway floor, making a sharp click in the silence. I held my breath, my heart pounding like a drum, and I hurried back into the garden, hiding behind an old tree, praying they would not discover me. I stayed there, in the darkness, breathing raggedly, waiting. A short while later, I heard the bedroom door close, the light go out. Victoria had probably finished her call, not suspecting that I had heard everything. I quietly returned to my room, closed the door slowly, and sat on the bed, playing the recording I had just made. The voices of Victoria and her parents sounded out, each word like a knife stabbing into my heart. Arthur is a fool, that old woman, false documents. Those words were not just proof, they were a declaration of war. From that moment, I knew this battle was not just mine. It was to protect Arthur, to protect the Sterling Grill restaurant chain and everything I had built in my life. The sleepless nights had taught me that I could not continue living in fear and suspicion. I decided to turn the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Sterling Grill restaurant chain into the stage to bring down the curtain on the performance by Victoria and her family. I spent weeks preparing everything, taking care of every detail. I booked the largest ballroom in the city, where the crystal lights and glass walls had witnessed so many important moments for my family. The invitations were sent out everywhere, to partners, friends, relatives, and of course to the Martin family. I heard rumors that they were going around bragging, saying that the Sterling family was on the verge of a major power transfer. Hearing those words, I just smiled to myself, but inside I knew they were about to walk into a trap that I had set myself. On the day of the ceremony, the ballroom shone like a palace. White ribbons fluttered gently in the breeze, vases full of red roses gave off a sweet scent, and the crystal lights sparkled like stars. I wore a simple but elegant black silk dress, and in front of the mirror, I told myself, "Eleanor, today you have to be strong." But my heart was trembling, not with fear, but because I knew that after this night, everything would change forever. Victoria entered the ballroom on Arthur's arm, wearing a vibrant red dress, radiant as a queen. She smiled and greeted the guests with perfect elegance, as if she were born to belong in that place. Her parents, Edward and Caroline, followed her with faces full of pride. They shook hands with everyone and said with a confident voice, "It is an honor for our daughter to be a part of the Sterling family." I looked at them, feeling a mixture of anger and bitterness. They thought they had already won, that their plan was about to be fulfilled. But they did not know that I was ready to change the rules of the game. The ceremony began, and I went up on stage. The lights blinded me, making me feel like I was in the middle of a storm. I took a deep breath, smiled, and began my speech. 40 years ago, I was just a widowed woman with a young son and a big dream, I said, my voice trembling as I remembered those difficult years. I worked day and night, facing looks of doubt, to turn the Sterling Grill restaurant chain into the pride of our family. The ballroom erupted in applause. I looked down and saw Arthur smiling with pride, while Victoria applauded with her perfect smile, without a single crack. Then I paused, letting silence fill the room, and looked directly at Victoria. "And today," I said with a firm voice, "I want to announce an important decision. I am going to hand over part of the control of the restaurant chain to my daughter-in-law, Victoria Martin." The audience murmured in surprise. The Martins looked at each other with shining eyes, as if they had just received a victory. Arthur kissed his wife's forehead, and Victoria lowered her head with false modesty. I really did not expect this honor. But I saw, for an instant, a triumphant flash in her eyes. I smiled and invited her to come up on stage. She walked forward, her red dress gleaming under the lights, and adjusted the microphone with the confidence of someone who knows all eyes are on her. "I promise not to disappoint you, Eleanor," she said in a sweet voice, "and I will do everything possible to continue the legacy of the Sterling family." The audience applauded enthusiastically again, but I stood there, my heart pounding, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived. I gave a signal to the technician. The huge LED screen behind the stage suddenly lit up, and the recording of that late-night call echoed clearly in the silent ballroom. "Arthur is a fool. This restaurant chain will soon be ours." Victoria's cold voice sounded sharp. "We have to hurry. A child will bind them forever," continued Caroline's voice. The entire auditorium fell silent. The music stopped. All eyes turned to Victoria, who was frozen on stage, her face pale. I approached her and calmly took the microphone from Victoria's trembling hands. "This is the true face of the person I trusted," I said with a firm voice, not of anger, but of deep pain. On the screen, one after another, photos of Victoria and Julian embracing in a hotel lobby appeared, along with enlarged, clear text messages. "When Arthur signs the papers, everything will be ours." A murmur erupted in the room. Low voices, gasps, heads shaking in disapproval. Victoria screamed, her voice breaking with desperation. "It is a lie. Someone is trying to destroy me." But no one believed her anymore. The evidence on the screen was too clear, too cruel. I looked at my son Arthur, who stood motionless, like a statue. His eyes were wide open, his face marked by pain and betrayal. Arthur stood in the middle of the ballroom, with a lost look, as if his world had collapsed. Then, in an instant, he acted. With trembling hands, he slowly removed the wedding ring from his finger. The gold gleamed under the crystal lights. The ring fell to the stage floor. It rolled a few inches before stopping, cold and lonely. "Victoria!" Arthur shouted, his voice hoarse with so much pain. "You lied to us all. From this moment, between you and me, everything is over." His words cut through the silence like a blade. The guests exclaimed in surprise. Whispers spread like waves. I saw my son's red eyes, but his chin remained high, clinging to the last trace of dignity. Victoria collapsed on the stage, covering her face with her hands, tears streaming down her once radiant skin. "No, Arthur, it is not like that," she sobbed in a choked voice. "Eleanor, forgive me. I made a mistake." She turned to me, her eyes pleading, but I just stared at her, my heart hardened like stone. "Trust, once broken, cannot be repaired," I said in a firm voice, without a hint of doubt. "There is no longer a place for you here." Those words, though cold, came from the depths of my soul. I had opened my heart to Victoria like a daughter. I had trusted her, but it had all been a facade to steal what I loved most. Victoria's parents, Mr. Edward and Mrs. Caroline, rushed to the stage, pale, trying to justify themselves amidst the panic. "It was a misunderstanding," Caroline shouted, her voice trembling. "Our daughter was deceived. Someone set all this up." But no one in the room believed them. The looks of contempt, the gestures of disappointment from the guests, fell upon the Martin family like hammer blows. They had arrived at the event sure of their victory, believing they would be the winners. But now they were left as the defeated, exposed in the relentless light of truth. A business partner of many years, Mr. Peterson, came over. He put a hand on my shoulder and said in a warm voice, "Eleanor, you were very smart. We all nearly fell into the trap." I nodded, forcing a smile, but my heart felt heavy. The clarity he spoke of did not make me feel proud. It only hurt more, because I knew the person most hurt was not me, but Arthur. I looked at my son and saw him step down from the stage, his shoulders slumped and his gaze empty. He walked straight to the door, without looking back even once, as if he wanted to flee from this nightmare. I ran after him, my heart shattered, but at the same time, I felt a slight relief. The nightmare that Victoria and her family had created was finally over. In the days following the anniversary party, our house was plunged into a heavy silence. Arthur became withdrawn. He spent the entire day locked in his study, where architectural plans piled up on his desk untouched. Every time I looked at him, I saw his reddened eyes, his gaunt face, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I wanted to hug him, to tell him that everything would be all right, but every time I opened my mouth, I feared my words would only deepen his wound. I tried to keep the Sterling Grill restaurant chain running as usual, but my mind could not stray from my son. Every day I went to the restaurant, smiled at the staff, checked the accounts, but my heart felt suspended. I thought about what happened during the party, about the moment Victoria was unmasked, about the wedding ring rolling on the stage floor. And I thought about the person who had sent the proof, the note, the photos, the recording. Who was it? Why did they help me? That question spun in my mind like an unanswered riddle. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight filtered through the window, Lily appeared at my door with a basket of homemade bread rolls. She wore a simple sweater, her black hair tied back softly, and her sweet smile was like a fresh breeze that dispelled the heaviness in the air. "Mrs. Sterling, I made some rolls. I hope you and Arthur like them," she said in a soft but sincere voice. I smiled, invited her in, silently grateful for her presence. Lily was always like that. She brought a serene peace with her, like a daughter I had once dreamed of having as my daughter-in-law. We sat in the living room, around the old wooden table. Arthur also came out of his room, though his face still showed exhaustion. Lily placed the basket on the table and, without realizing it, left her phone beside it. The screen lit up, and an old message appeared, brief but powerful. "Be careful. Victoria is hiding a secret." Arthur saw it out of the corner of his eyes widening as if waking from a dream. He took the phone with trembling hands and said, "Lily? The note at the wedding. The photos. Was it you?" Lily startled. She tried to take back the phone, but her tear-filled eyes already said it all. She lowered her head, biting her lip, as if struggling to remain calm. I looked at her, my heart pounding. Was she the one who had secretly helped me? Arthur did not take his eyes off her. His voice became low, almost pleading. "Lily, tell me the truth. Was it you who did all that?" Lily looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Arthur, I did not want to see you suffer," she sobbed, "but I could not stay silent watching them deceive you." She turned to me, her eyes full of regret. "Mrs. Sterling, forgive me for not telling you anything directly. I was afraid that no one would believe me, that they would think I was doing it out of envy for Victoria." Lily paused, took a deep breath, and continued in a trembling voice. "I knew about Victoria and Julian a long time ago. They met in Chicago, even before she met him. I tried to warn Victoria. I asked her not to do anything that could hurt him, but she just laughed and told me I was jealous, that I did not want to see her happy. I did not know what to do, so I left the note at the wedding. I sent you the photos and the recordings. I just wanted to protect him, to protect your family." Lily's words flowed like a clear but pain-filled stream, piercing straight to my heart. Arthur slumped into his chair, his hands on his head, as if the truth was too heavy to bear. "Why did you not tell me, Lily?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why did you do all this alone?" Lily broke down in tears, the tears falling onto her clasped hands. "Because at that moment, you were happy, Arthur. You looked at Victoria as if she were your whole world. I was afraid you would not believe me, afraid you would think I just wanted to destroy your relationship. I could only do it that way. I am sorry." I stood up, walked over to her, and hugged her tightly, feeling as if I were embracing a daughter who had been away for too long. "Thank you, Lily," I whispered, my voice choked. "You saved our entire family." The young woman in my arms trembled, but I could feel her strength, the strength of a sincere heart, willing to sacrifice for those she loves. I looked at Arthur and saw in his eyes the reflection of regret and gratitude. For the first time, he seemed to understand that Lily, his childhood friend, had always been there, silently protecting him, even when it caused her pain. The months that followed the anniversary scandal passed like the wind, taking with them both pain and hope. I thought the wounds that Victoria and her family had left would be a permanent thorn in our hearts. But time, like a patient teacher, taught me that even the deepest scars can heal if we have enough love and faith. The Sterling Grill restaurant chain, the legacy I worked for my whole life, weathered the storm. The customers returned, the employees worked with a new spirit, and most importantly, Arthur, my son, began to find himself again. Arthur no longer locked himself in his office with his unfinished plans. He began to get more involved in managing the business, bringing fresh ideas. From modernizing the menu with more current dishes to organizing cooking workshops to attract a younger audience. Seeing him in the kitchen, chatting animatedly with Chef Henry, or reviewing the accounts with the same concentration I had 40 years ago, filled my heart with pride. But, beyond all that, I saw a new spark in his eyes, no longer of pain or betrayal, but of determination to move forward. Lily became an indispensable part of these days. She would often stop by the restaurant, sometimes to help me review the menu, other times just to bring a tray of homemade rolls wrapped in parchment paper and with that unmistakable aroma. Every time Lily appeared, the atmosphere became warmer, as if she brought with her the sun of a summer afternoon. Arthur, though still a bit reserved, began to smile more when she was around. I realized that, in those small moments when they laughed together, or when Lily tenderly straightened the tablecloth he had accidentally moved, there was a simple but deep connection between them, just what I had always wanted for my son. On Christmas Eve, I decided to host a small dinner at home, just for the closest people. There were no dazzling crystal lights, no white ribbons, no luxurious vases like at the anniversary parties. Just a small tree in the middle of the living room, a table with the family's traditional dishes, and the soft Christmas music coming from an old speaker. I was in the kitchen, preparing the pot roast. The aroma of the spices made me remember the difficult but meaningful days. Arthur and Lily were decorating the tree together, and their laughter mingled, filling the house. I stood there, watching those two children, now adults, hanging the shiny ornaments, and I felt a strange peace. The weight of the years, the fear, and the mistrust seemed to dissolve, leaving a warm space where love and hope were beginning to flourish. From time to time, I still heard news about the Martin family. Their business had declined, and their reputation was ruined after the scandal. According to rumors, Victoria had left the city without a trace. A part of me wanted to know where she was, what she was doing, but then I understood that it no longer mattered. Victoria and her family had become part of the past, a painful but necessary lesson for Arthur and me to learn to value what truly matters. One evening, as the three of us were sitting on the porch, drinking hot coffee and looking at the city lights in the distance, Arthur broke the silence. "Mom," he said in a firm but serene voice, "now I understand that happiness is not in what shines on the outside, it is in the sincerity and peace of being with those who truly love you." I looked at him and saw a different glint in his eyes. No longer the pain of the past, but the understanding of someone who has grown through loss. Lily, by his side, smiled softly, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, as if to hide a bit of shyness. "You are right, Arthur," I replied in a low voice. "True family is not always the one that shares your blood, but the one that loves and protects you, even at the cost of sacrificing in silence." I looked at Lily. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw gratitude, mixed with a slight blush. "Lily," I continued, "I will never forget what you did for us. You gave Arthur and me a chance to start over." Lily lowered her head, her cheeks flushed under the dim light. "I only did what I thought was right, Mrs. Sterling," she said in a soft but sincere voice. Arthur looked at her, and for the first time, I saw a different light in my son's eyes. Not just of gratitude, but of a deeper feeling, something that perhaps he himself did not yet understand. I smiled, full of hope. Perhaps, after all the pain, a new, warmer, and brighter chapter was beginning for our family. In the following days, the Sterling Grill continued to grow. Arthur proposed organizing a charity event to help needy children in the city, and Lily offered to collaborate. Watching them work together, from planning to preparation in the kitchen, I felt as if I were watching a younger version of myself and my husband. I knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but with Arthur and Lily by my side, I was no longer afraid. Every night, when I sit in the living room and hear the laughter of Arthur and Lily coming from the kitchen, I feel my heart lighten. I think about the long road I have traveled, from being a widowed woman with a young son, to becoming a mother willing to face the whole world to protect her family. And now I understand that family is not only what one builds, but also the people one chooses to move forward with. Lily, with her courage and her silent love, has become an essential part of our family. I get up, go out onto the balcony, and look at the illuminated city. The night wind blows, bringing with it the scent of night-blooming jasmine flowers, and I smile. Life, no matter how many storms it has, always offers opportunities to heal and start anew. I close my eyes, let the peace wash over me, and thank fate for giving me Arthur, Lily, and a true family, not united by blood, but by love and trust. After everything I have been through, I understood that justice does not always come from courts or cold sentences. Sometimes it is born from courage, from faith that the truth, no matter how hidden, will sooner or later come to light. The betrayal broke me, but it also made me stronger than ever. I learned that trust is a treasure, and that when it is given, it must be done with wisdom so as not to be betrayed, and that true love is not in sweet words, but in silent sacrifices, like the ones Lily made for my son. Life can be cruel, but if we keep a kind heart and the courage to face the darkness, even after the storm, the light of justice and love will always arrive. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We do not tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Now, on the final screen, I will leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.